What is Metra? To answer this, we have to start with where we came from. In the 1960s, railroads across the United States were going bankrupt under the financial burden of operating passenger service. Higher operating costs drove higher fares, and due to higher fares, more and more people elected to not utilize the train as a method of getting to where they wanted to go, especially to work in the central business district. This drove the revenue gap that led to disinvestment and eventually bankruptcy one by one. Across the country, public subsidies were beginning to be utilized to support continued operations. Northeast Illinois was one of the last areas in the country to adopt this critical step to prevent the eventual collapse of the commuter/suburban rail services in our region. To accomplish this, Illinois had to adopt a new state constitution. During the Constitutional Convention in 1970, it was agreed to remove the ineffective and expensive debt limits provision from Article 4, Section 18 of the 1870 Constitution, and to apply language to Article 13, Section 7, public transportation is an essential public purpose for which public funds may be expended. This included all forms of public transportation. The new Constitution was ratified in 1970, but by this time in Illinois, the dire financial situation saw many forms of public transportation about to collapse in the region. In fact, prior to the effective date of the new Constitution in July 1971, Governor Ogilvie, in his first executive order and address to the General Assembly, urged the GA to provide $900 million transportation capital funds, of which $200 million was for public transportation. This set the stage for the passage of the 1971 Transportation Bond Act, but this did not address operations. This money could only be used to provide capital funding. To address operations, the General Assembly also passed the Emergency Public Transportation Assistance Act of 1971. Used for CTA, suburban bus, and rail, these funds would expire in June 1973. Governor Ogilvie also called for legislation to form the Department of Transportation, which began in 1972, and they were charged with advising the General Assembly and Governor on mass public transportation policy. A public transportation task force was set up. In 1973, CTA informed the General Assembly that either fares go up or services would have to be cut. Suburban bus operators were threatening to go out of business due to lack of funds for fuel and payroll, and all but one of the commuter railroads were petitioning the Illinois Commerce Commission, or ICC, for substantial fare increases. All through 1973, the General Assembly worked on a solution that was signed into law on December 12, 1973. But it was not official until the voters weighed in on a referendum on March 19, 1974, and it passed by less than 0.5%. Lake County challenged the outcome, but the Illinois Supreme Court ruled against the county's argument, so the RTA gets to work in mid-1974. The RTA established Purchase of Service Agreements, or PSAs, with the region's commuter operators. The RTA also now has the authority to set fares for commuter railroads without going through the ICC and establish the Commuter Rail Division of the RTA. This is what the Commuter Rail Division's territory looked like in 1974. But wait, another crisis. The tracks on the Rock Island are in such bad shape that on April 21, 1975, the ICC declares portions of the tracks unsafe for operations. This is what happens when critical infrastructure is not maintained. Later in 1975, the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad files for bankruptcy. In September 1979, the bankrupt Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad is ordered by the ICC to work with the interim management team to keep the suburban train operations running. On March 30, 1980, the Rock Island ends its operations. The ICC orders the Chicago and Northwestern to operate Rock Island suburban service. In 1981, like many other transit authorities across the country, the RTA is experiencing a severe financial crisis and is forced to suspend payments to carriers and suppliers. The Chicago and Northwestern tell the RTA that they will terminate operations of the Rock Island suburban services by April 1981. In April 1981, RTA establishes the Northeast Illinois Regional Commuter Railroad Corporation, also known as NIRCRC, or more concisely, NIRC. The RTA engaged in a PSA with NERC to relieve the Chicago and Northwestern of its operations of the former Rock Island on June 1, 1981. However, with continued inadequate funding, the RTA doubles fares in 1980. And by 1981, commuter ridership falls by over 25%, exacerbating the funding gap further. Meanwhile, in October 1982, NERC takes over operation of the bankrupt Milwaukee Road suburban service. By 1983, the RTA is virtually bankrupt, with costs rising, infrastructure getting worse, and ridership not rebounding. The General Assembly gets involved again, and in 1983 revises the RTA Act to provide more funds and formulas to support the public transportation needs of the region, including the 50-50 fare box recovery ratio to guarantee equity in the system. Also in the revised act is the establishment of the Commuter Rail Service Board of the RTA and the Suburban Bus Service Board of the RTA, as it saw the need for the RTA to be an oversight board, an arm's length away from operations. Senator Keats has said, "What we need to do is get the chief board out of being both the operator and the oversight. As you are aware, when you are the operator and oversight at the same time, you tend to screw up one or the other." The Commuter Rail Service Board would be able to address the complex issues of operating the rail system and oversee the PSAs with the commuter rail operators. On June 8, 1984, the Commuter Rail Service Board meets for the first time, and they get to work. These are its first members. Metra's name is established in 1985. In 1987, Metra purchases the Illinois Central Suburban Service for $26 million and takes over the Joliet to Chicago service, renaming it the Heritage Corridor. Later in 1987, the RTA provided a $68 million loan to the Commuter Rail Division to purchase the former Milwaukee Road suburban lines that it was operating, not including dispatching. What did Metra get with these purchases? A lot of equipment and infrastructure in a massive state of disrepair. Of course, this small sampling of photos cannot come close to fully encompassing the amount of work that needed to be done. What did the rolling stock look like? These are some of the motive power units inherited by Metra and the years they were made. This Budd car is 71 years old. Budd, the last U.S. car manufacturer, went out of business in 1987. These railcars are still in service today.
Here are a handful of before and after pictures of various locations across Metra property. This is the Chicago Passenger Terminal, which we now know as Ogilvie Transportation Center. LaSalle Street Station, before and after. Western Avenue Shop, which was rebuilt in 1989. 47th and 49th Street shops before and after. The BNSF 14th Street shop in 1989. Eighteenth Street is an example of more to do, including dozens of stations, hundreds of bridges, miles of retaining walls, and the late 1980s investments, all which need to be maintained. Pictured in the lower right and center of the photo are the 1926 buildings, which are still in use today. Rail conditions have always been a priority for Metra. In the beginning, we could not run maximum allowed speed on many areas of the service region. Metra started installing continuous welded rail, CWR, bringing track standards up so we could run maximum authorized speed. We currently maintain a Class 4 and Class 5 standard. Our signal equipment looks like something out of the 1940s. That's because it was. Our modem signal equipment is more reliable and safer, but it also needs constant upgrades. One of our largest accomplishments was the opening and expansion of the North Central service in 1996. 15 new stations were added to accommodate the new service line. Metra inherited hundreds of outdated and old bridges. In the upper left is a picture of the typical bridge found on the North Line. The lower left shot shows the difference between new and old. In the center is the new view from the engineer. The right picture is the latest work done at the new Peterson Ridge Station. Daily, Metra operates on and over 926 bridges.
Metra has always risen to the occasion when the largest challenges have been before us. On June 22, 2003, Riverdale Bridge burned, severing the Metra Electric in half because of work being done on the bridge. 8 days later, we were able to cross the bridge, and in 2 more additional days, revenue service was restored. No set of slides describing challenges is complete without mentioning winter and the men and women who keep the system running safely, providing service for our passengers. Tower A2 in the upper left will be the last remaining tower in Metra's system. It was clearly stated that Metra would never be the same as it was prior to COVID, and this caused us to look at ways to reinvent ourselves. Commuter rail was hit the hardest of any form of public transportation in the country. And, as always, our employees rose to the occasion, looking out for our passengers and each other. We simply got things done. Passengers are the reason we exist and who we serve. This is just a small sampling of our passenger community. Our current day's average remains just under 200,000 trips, but when needing to rise to the occasion, Metra was there for the regions. Our top 3 highest ridership dates were the Blackhawks 2013 Stanley Cup win, the 4th of July fireworks show on July 3, 2007. We traditionally have very high ridership days tied to the Taste of Chicago. And our all-time highest ridership date was November 4th, 2016, with nearly 470,000 riders. Another way we have reinvented ourselves was with the holiday trains, bringing Metra joy to thousands of passengers in 2022 and tens of thousands in 2023 by running them for a month on revenue service. In June of this year, we ran our first train acknowledging Pride Month. Over the past 7 years, we have celebrated our heritage from where Metra originated through our heritage locomotives. The pride in the workforce runs deep. Railcar rehabs are an example of making the most of the money we are entrusted with for improvements. All the work has been brought in-house utilizing the skills of our workforce. And the same is true for the Highliners that we're rebuilding on the Metra Electric. We continue to rebuild our locomotives. Locomotive 100, pictured in the top right after purchase from the RTA, was originally built in 1976. The bottom picture is from June of 2024. This locomotive has been rebuilt multiple times. To improve our passenger experience, we built in-house Acorn, Metra Tracker, and TroyNet, bringing better information to our passengers. All 3 are overseen by our new track center. We continue to address our state of good repair needs. On a positive note, we have ordered 250 new Alstom railcars. We've repurposed modern freight locomotives into passenger service, providing more reliable service and our cleanest running locomotives on property. We're looking forward to the arrival of the battery-powered Stadler train sets, which will provide a zero-emission solution for some of the work that we do, also putting us on the cutting edge of technology.
Commuter rail's funding has evolved as new challenges appear, and today that's no different. We currently have a new funding model where our goal, along with our state legislator, is to figure out how to fill in that gap currently covered by the COVID relief funding when it runs out in 2026. Where to next? We have seen growth and improvements over the years, all in pursuit of increasing Metra's value to the region, to our riders, and to our residents. That pursuit remains unchanged. While time will tell where we go from here, one thing is for certain. Without adequate funding, we will repeat the patterns of the past. We'll continue to play catch-up, and we will not be able to realize our huge potential. So what is Metra? Metra is a transportation agency that employs thousands of employees, that changes the lives of our residents with safe, timely, affordable, and comfortable service, and contributes to the economic and environmental health of the region we serve. We are historically underfunded, but still a vital, irreplaceable asset, as noted by the history of our creation, and we can and want to be so much more. Thank you all again. You have made Metra what it is today.